Something else to keep in mind is that if the response is going to be, well, this was a lone gunman and clearly a sign of severe mental illness, which I'm not going to say one way or the other until we know all the facts of the matter. If that's something you care about, then why are you not advocating for things like Medicare for all? If you genuinely care about a mental health crisis in your country, if you can actually look at the statistics and see the amount of people who are in jail who do have mental illness, who do have substance abuse problems, then attacking those problems should be at the forefront. If you think mental illness is a problem, then you should be doing things to address mental illness.
Children and 2 teachers were shot dead in an elementary school in the city of Uvalde on Tuesday. The attack on the Robb Elementary School was carried out by a teenager armed with guns he just bought on his 18th birthday. The gunman died in the attack. Earlier in the day on Tuesday, he shot and critically wounded his grandmother. Families have begun sharing the names of some of the victims. They include Xavier Lopez, 10 years old, Jose Flores, 10 years old, Uzziah Garcia, 9, Amerijo Garza, 10, Annabel Guadalupe Rodriguez, 10, and 2 4th-grade teachers, Ava Morelos and Irma Garcia. Robb Elementary School is a school with about 600 students in just 3 grades, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. The school is about 90% Latinx. Thursday was scheduled to be the last day of class for the year. The school district superintendent, Hal Harrell, spoke Tuesday.
My heart was broken today. We're a small community, and we'll need your prayers to get us through this.
Tuesday's attack was the deadliest elementary school shooting since the 2012 massacre at Sandy Hook in Connecticut, when a 20-year-old gunman killed 26 people, 20 of them children between the ages of 6 and 7. On Tuesday night, President Biden addressed the nation.
As a nation, we have to ask, when in God's name are we going to stand up to the gun lobby? When in God's name?
Good question, Biden.
We do what we all know in our gut needs to be done.
You've been in power for quite a long time.
The shooting in Uvalde came just 10 days after an 18-year-old self-described white supremacist attacked a grocery store in the heart of Buffalo's African-American community. He shot dead 10 people, all of whom were black. Many of them were grandmothers. On Tuesday, a funeral was held for 65-year-old Celestine Chaney. This comes as the National Rifle Association plans to host its annual meeting Friday in Houston, Texas, with more than 55,000 people set to attend and hear speeches by former President Trump and Republican Texas lawmakers, including Governor Greg Abbott and Senators Ted Cruz and John Cornyn. For more, we head to Texas, to the capital, Austin, to speak with Nicole Golden, Executive Director of Texas Gun Sense. Nicole, welcome to Democracy Now! On this horrific day. First of all, our condolences on the horror that has taken place in Uvalde. I mean, I was just saying this 10 days ago to the people of Buffalo. But if you can respond to what happened and the climate in Texas and what you think needs to happen.
Yeah, I'll be honest. We're all barely hanging in there. It's nothing compared to what this community must be experiencing. I'm sitting here talking to you while I'm exhausted, and my own kids are getting ready for school. I have to compartmentalize what happened in order to do the work that I do. But it's so critically important.
God damn, The Onion. Onion going hard, you're right. Rightly so.
I've been involved in gun violence prevention in Texas for almost a decade. I have sat through brutal hearings at the state legislature. I have heard unbelievable arguments to our very...
They've reposted the first article in response to every school shooting since Sandy Hook, at least. Wow. Good. Use the platform for good. Fuck. Why is The Onion always the ones at the forefront of, a lot of these issues with the right take? the satire paper, the comedy paper.
Principle ask for common sense gun laws that most Texans support, laws that law enforcement supports, laws that are working to prevent gun violence in other states. But we have a political climate here that makes it such that it's been, our work has basically been, shut down. But we're here for the long haul. We're not going anywhere, and I'm certain that at some point when the political will is there, we will have built the infrastructure to see real change here. Until then, we'll keep chipping away, working in our communities to pass meaningful change, and continuing with building this extremely strong movement that we've created over.
Yeah, I can't imagine what our job is like, especially doing that in Texas.
And Nicole Golden, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, only hours after this shooting, this horrific massacre that occurred, said that teachers should be armed as well. Your response?
Look, you've probably heard this said before. If more guns made us safer, it would be the safest country in the world. That experiment has obviously failed us and failed our children completely. Guns in schools is not supported by educators. They are not teachers so that they can be armed during the day while they're trying to.
It's just wild too, because that rhetoric just keeps getting turned up. Like, what's the logical conclusion? Is it going to be that we should start training children how to use guns? Should children be armed? Should more kids be in schools with guns? Should we just fill the schools with kids with guns so that they can shoot the bad kids whenever they think they're going to do a mass shooting?
Love and support and educate their students. We do not
it's the
think
literal
that
definition
is the
of
answer,
insanity.
and we will push back if that is brought forward next legislative session.
And the alleged gunman here, Salvador Ramos, reportedly bought 2 assault rifles just last week. How easy is it to get a weapon like that in Texas? And are there any age restrictions at all?
That very well could have been a legal purchase. That doesn't make it right, of course. It is far too easy to walk into any number of gun retailers. Federally licensed dealers have to run a background check here in Texas according to federal guidelines. But you can also purchase a gun through an online sale or at a gun show from a collector, for example, with no questions asked. So there are many different ways that somebody can purchase a deadly firearm. Some states have closed their loopholes so that there's a background check required on every gun sale to prevent, we can't prevent every shooting, but we can definitely prevent some by trying to keep guns out of hands of potentially dangerous individuals. But that measure has not succeeded in Texas to close those loopholes, as well as other measures that we've tried to pass at the state level.
I mean, it seems like under Greg Abbott, it's gone in the opposite direction. I just want to quickly bring this up, and not to detract from the story at hand, but Israeli forces shot dead a 16-year-old Gaith Mohammed Rafik Ziad Yamin today at 1:15 a.m. near Kabr Yusuf, Jacob's tomb, east of the occupied West Bank city of Nablus. He was sustained a gunshot wound to the head. It's the 12th Palestinian child killed by Israeli forces. And not to detract from the horrors and atrocities that just took place in Texas, but to mention that there is the unjust killing of children globally. And we often just have this kind of cognitive dissonance when it comes to it happening in other countries, especially when it comes to the mass starvation of kids in Yemen, which again is due to a proxy war, which is fueled by our support of Saudi Arabia. By our, I mean NATO allies. All NATO allies are supporting that in one regard or another. There's the mass starvation of children in Afghanistan now due to the direct involvement of both Canada and the United States acting in their desire to forward imperial ambitions in those countries, leading to such a massive starvation problem in Afghanistan right now that people are literally selling their children for food. And these are horrifying atrocities that we are complicit in on a regular basis. We just tune it out. We tune all of it out and don't think about it, and continue to support apparently politicians who are willing to fund the actions of the Israeli government. And so much of that should be, like if people want to say full stop that I cannot in good conscience ever support another politician who's willing to support a lack of gun control in the United States, I think this has to extend to a whole bunch of things. It has to extend to then we can no longer support politicians who are going to continue to fund Israel. We can no longer support politicians who are going to continue to sell arms to Saudi Arabia. That includes multiple different countries, you know? It is a series of global horrifying atrocities that a lot of the times we sit back and we either ignore or don't recognize how much we fuel them. Policies that could make us safer, that could prevent massacres of children and people in public areas are incredibly popular. The problem isn't a lack of support. The problem is that our leaders have failed us by lacking courage and compassion. I wish I could say what happened in Uvalde is an unfathomable tragedy, but it's not. It's a completely predictable one. This disgusting state of affairs and the senseless tragedies could be prevented if our leaders had courage and were concerned about more than the economy. We absolutely have to address gun culture in the United States. We have to admit that our white supremacist foundations have led to a state of paranoia, of firearm fetishism. Sorry. This is a massive part of the problem and requires a sea change of cultural proportions. We must recognize that the GOP, with this radicalization, is dependent on fear, paranoia, and conspiracy theories, has created an environment where guns and violence are a main part of the appeal. This state we're living in isn't independent of that at all. By the way, Marjorie Taylor Greene just got reelected. And any conversation about gun violence or mass shootings has to involve the NRA, an institution that has done more to harm Americans and created more tragedy than anyone else. It is absolute blight on the American body, and its influence cannot be downplayed. We also need to disabuse ourselves of some notions. The idea that any policy which might address the gun of scourge violence will inspire conspiracy theorists is absurd. Listen to them. Even without any push for reform, they're still claiming there's a conspiracy. Regardless of any push for gun control or policies which might protect us, the far right is going to claim there's a conspiracy to take guns or put people in camps. Fear of stoking that is wasted time, and in a country with mass shootings like ours, we have only so much time. We need something more than the displays of outrage and mourning. They get us nothing besides a moment of respite. The public performance of the American mass shooting has become a spectacle. We need action, we need courage, we need leadership. Our government has been corrupted by the wealthy and through hyper-capitalism and neoliberalism more or less rendered into performatives and spectacles. They are largely hollow. We don't need performance, we need action, we need reform. Remember when this ended systemic violence in the United States? The problem is cowardice, and the problem is that our representatives are largely wealthy individuals bankrolled by wealthy interests and institutions. They're there to help the wealthy get wealthier, to cut regulation, to continue corporate welfare. That's it. Since the rise of neoliberalism, governments have all but completely co-opted and turned into a machine that only helps the market and its beneficiaries. The actual ideology refuses to help citizens. We've been failed by these people who don't care if we live or die. We have to stop expecting figures like Joe Manchin to do the right thing. That's not why he's in Washington. He's there to get wealthier and to serve as a representative of the wealth class. Our struggles, our tragedies, they mean nothing to him. People like Manchin and Sinema and the others they hide represent a veto by the corporate and wealth interests. They're figureheads obscuring a larger truth. Our government does not operate in our favor, and we can't get anything done until we realize that. We cannot have an actual representative government as long as this system only allows members of the wealth class to run for office, because when they get there, it's to serve the interests of their peers and their class. Something has to give. And the history of the Democratic Party is damning. Consultants and strategists continuously tell members not to politicize these shootings and simply offer thoughts and prayers. Politics, as usual, isn't going to cut it. There's too much blood, too much loss. And the market isn't going to save us. What neoliberalism does with an epidemic of shootings is profit from it. Industries of security experts, plagues of school shooting drills, defense companies profiting off systems and plans. Like, this is the market responding to this. And while corporations and wealthy profit off school shootings and an environment of fear, our children are being traumatized daily. The public sphere is turning into a fire zone. The public cannot offer this as a problem. If we are going to actually address the scourge of gun violence and save the very prospect of an open society, it's going to take a sea change. Courage, sure, but a complete overhaul of who serves us and how. We cannot expect these agents of wealth to do it. These tragedies are mounting, each profoundly disturbing and unsettling. This problem should have been solved many, many times over. Our leaders have failed us. The extent of the failure is so immense that the mind reels in horror when actually confronting it. Gestures, spectacles, performances of shock and grief aren't going to cut it anymore. Not if we want a better, safer life. Not if we want to actually address this American sickness, this repulsive rot. We need courage. We need leaders who care if we live or if we die. Really, really good thread. Now, I want to debunk something immediately, because Paul Gosar, I think, was the most prominent politician spreading this, but it took 4chan no time at all to start spreading a transphobic conspiracy theory that the shooter was a trans woman, and using a picture of an individual who looked similar to the shooter's profile that had been released by the police. Immediately they started running with it, spreading it. It reached all the way to a major US politician, and then from there started being spread on numerous far right and right wing conservative media outlets. It's something that Matt Binder thankfully debunked almost immediately, but this kind of dangerous rhetoric spreads immediately. They're combining various forms of hatred into one, and this is an easy way to try and make the trans community a scapegoat in this issue, as if they haven't suffered enough. 4chan users, right-wingers, are sharing pictures of an innocent trans person they found on Reddit and are falsely claiming that the Uvalde school shooter. The trans Redditor has just now publicly posted a new photo in order to debunk the disinfo from individuals trying to claim they are the shooter. The shooter is deceased. Falsehood using their photos have been spreading in Twitter trends and on right-wing platforms like Gab. Folks, I'm just seeing some of the responses now. I spoke to the person in the photo. They are aware of my tweet. They want the disinformation debunked and the post falsely accusing them corrected and taken down. Super fucked up. Another really good tweet. When a small group of protesters were outside of the Supreme Court Justice's house, the Senate took action within 24 hours. You do the things you want to, and you value the people you value. It's really as simple as that. Bipartisan support. Something else incredibly fucked up. 18 children dead in Texas, and ICE is on the scene, which means many parents will have to risk detention in U.S. concentration camps while checking if their kids are alive. What the fuck? It's just like evil within evil. Like, and this, you know, is something that is still supported by the democratic U.S. government. We don't talk a lot about ICE these days. We've kind of pushed it out of the forefront. But this is a grim reality for a lot of people living in the United States, especially members of the Latinx community. And how absolutely horrifying is this? To think that someone would have to risk getting potentially locked up just to find out whether or not their child may be the victim of a mass shooting. Now, there's a thing that is being widely reported now, I think almost exclusively on the left. Elementary school teachers died trying to put their bodies in between the children and a bullet, but these cops waited outside for backup because it might be dangerous for them. Apparently, the cops chasing the shooter after the shooter crashed into a ditch near the school didn't pursue the shooter into the school itself, and instead called for backup while the shooter carried out what he did inside. The original thing that was being spread online was that the shooter had Kevlar on. That's now apparently also been debunked. Authorities also learned that the suspect was not wearing body armor, as previously reported, only a plate carrier, which did not actually contain any ballistic armor. The Texas gunman had no armor. Police fled the scene because they were scared. The gunmen at Uvalde, Texas, wore body armor during the attack. The initial officers were unable to bring down the shooter and had to wait until the tactical teams came in order to finally stop the gunman, per the Texas DPS. Body armor protects one fairly small portion of the body, and multiple trained officers withdrew because they were scared and let unarmed children deal with the shooter instead. That strikes me as horrific. Body armor does not make you a Master Chief. It protects one portion of your chest, roughly the size of your heart and lungs, from gunfire. Now, I'm not going to sit here and posture that I'm some kind of incredible soldier who's very well trained in combat and would be the first person to run into that school in order to save a bunch of kids. I'm also not paid by the city I live in to be a police officer charged with doing just that. So this becomes an issue of, if that is the case, if this turns out to be true, then we have to have a serious look at the idea of continuously overfunding the police, as well as giving them tactical military gear on a regular basis. Because if it comes down to it, if it's like, okay, we have to do this because it's going to keep our community safe, this is not about over-policing, this is not about extending police budgets to untold levels, this is, again, about keeping community members safe. Well, what happens when these things are put into practice? If this is in fact the truth, if this, because again, I can't 100% confirm this yet, but if this is 100% the case, then this is a system in which people were willing to wait until there was tactical units to show up to be able to handle this issue while the shooter was able to walk into the school. which again strikes me as horrifying, if true.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. As we reported, the NRA, the National Rifle Association, plans to host its annual meeting Friday in Houston, Texas, with more than 55,000 people set to attend and hear speeches by former President Trump, Republican Texas lawmakers, including Governor Greg Abbott and Senators Ted Cruz and John Cornyn.
Also, reputable Texas papers were reporting it as fact online, the plate carrier thing on multiple sites. It's not that I think that's already been confirmed. It's more the idea of this characterization that the cops were in pursuit of this person, and if they were chasing him, then that, that chase eventually led to this elementary school. And I don't want to speculate about whether or not that was going to be an intended target or not, or whether the pursuit itself led to that. That's something that is unknowable to me. But then if that situation ended up with the shooter eventually crashing the car, running into the school, and then the cops not doing anything and then waiting for tactical gears to show up, that's the thing that truly horrifies me, if that was the case.
This despite Tuesday's massacre at Uvalde Elementary School. The death toll so far is 19 children, mainly aged 9 and 10, and 2 fourth-grade teachers. For more, we're joined by Michael Spies, senior staff writer at The Trace, where he's reported extensively on the NRA and the fight for gun control. Michael, welcome back to Democracy Now! Let's begin with the response of
Police have no duty to protect the public. Though often unsaid in police reform debates, numerous court precedents have established that cops are not obligated to act in interest of the citizens. Last Wednesday, a 24-hour search, a suspect was apprehended in New York City Sunset Park shooting and injured at least 10 people. Amid the predictable gun control and police funding debates have been too royal across social media, it's fair to also ask, why hasn't the NYPD more effectively responding to the situation? After the shooting, the NYPD was faulted for not stopping the subway lines, having their radio and communications apparatus malfunction, and exhibiting a plain lack of urgency, The Intercept reported. Indeed, some speculated that the only reason they caught the suspect was because he made it really easy for them. He had lunch at Cat's Deli during the manhunt before tipping off the police himself, and that wasn't even then. It was another individual who was able to identify him and point him out to the police. This fits with a number of incidents where the police failed to protect the public. Yes, the Prospect's Ryan Cooper wrote, they routinely give more money after the tragedies. The question that gets asked in the aftermath are limited. Do police lack the resources to prevent crimes, or do they make a tactical and logistical error that can be fixed with new leadership or more training? All these questions are situated in the traditional belief that the police are there to proactively prevent and de-escalate dangerous situations. The average citizen has been convinced of this imagery of police as heroic and uniquely brave citizens, despite being debunked by both the actions of the police forces and the courts themselves. Not to mention, by the way, whenever there is the killing of a police officer, there is an outcry overwhelmingly by the public. If you've seen the funerals that take place, especially in New York, where you see just the sheer volume of police officers they have there, it's an actual army. And yes, it's tragic when anyone is killed, and I completely understand that. But we have this myth in modern society that it's the most dangerous job that there is, and that because of that, because they go in the line of duty, that they have to be esteemed as heroes consistently, even if they happen to occasionally do things like kill children, even if they happen to do things like disproportionately stop indigenous Americans, or disproportionately stop black Americans and arrest black Americans, even though there'll be an equatable amount of drug use with white Americans and things like that. But still, they're heroes because they are risking their lives every single day. And who are you to say different? And then when you look at the statistics and you look that there is a huge amount of people who die in the line of duty of delivering things, delivery drivers, they die in the line of duty, and you don't think about that, like that meme, that joke, the thin bread crust. It's an actually genuinely risky job. There are tons of dangers that present itself to you when you're engaging like all the time with strangers. If you are a delivery driver, if you're a taxi driver, if you're a goods driver, pizza delivery drivers, if they have like equal or more dangerous jobs, we never reflect upon their lives in the same way. They're never considered like the heroes who valiantly every day get up to deliver us our food and shan't be for them, but if they go into the line of duty, they may get killed. They know that risk every day. They don't know that risk every day, but still it occurs to them. It's really fucked up. It's this weird way of spinning it into this kind of like almost superhero-esque mythology. Let's go back 11 years to February 2011, the same place, New York City, as he told Crack.com 4 years ago. Joseph Lozito was on his morning commute through New York City when he hopped on the subway, blissfully aware of the brutal stabbing spree perpetuated by... and that has been going on for the past 24 hours at that point. He would be the final victim of this. After Gelman boarded the train and confronted the police officers, they were in a secure area. He turned and said, "You're going to die." What transpired afterwards was what he described as every man thinks about twice a day. He tackled Gelman and they struggled physically, and he stabbed him in the head until they both hit the ground, and he disarmed him. Only then did the NYPD intervene to apprehend him. In this case, one of the cops allegedly admitted that he did not intervene in the altercation because he thought that he had a gun, instead hiding from the attacker. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that I would do any better in one of these situations. I'm not trying to say like, all these cowards, I would save the day. I'm not trying to say that. The difference being that these individuals are paid, and paid in some cases very handsomely, and also given military equipment in order to do that thing. And that is the way this whole thing is consistently sold to us. And even when there's pushbacks, like the Black Lives Matter movement or any of this kind of stuff, we're constantly reminded of the fact that, yes, but these people are the people you're going to call if there's a killer outside of your house, if there's a shooter outside of your house, if there's a shooter inside of a mall, you're going to call the cops, right? He lost the case in 2013, not because the Manhattan Supreme Court judge didn't believe him, or because he lacked evidence, or because the cops had good reason for not intervening. He lost because of a precedent established by the U.S. Supreme Court. The cops do not have a duty to protect you or anyone. In 2005, Jessica Gonzalez sued Castle Rock, Colorado for police failing to arrest her husband, who had violated a protective order resulting in the murder of her 3 children. Her case went to the Supreme Court in Town versus Castle Rock versus Gonzalez, and she lost because even though the order required arresting her husband upon violation, then Justice Anthony Scalia, what a surprise, successfully argued that a well-established tradition of police discretion has long coexisted with apparently mandatory arrest statutes. This case builds upon the Supreme Court precedent DeShaney versus Winnebago County Department of Social Services. In that case, the young boy was repeatedly abused at the hands of his father, something that county social services were aware of, but made no effort to remove the child. His mother sued once the 4-year-old entered a vegetative state. The court ruled that the state did not have a special obligation to protect a citizen against the harms it did not create. Based on these precedents, Lozito was told by the New York City case that no direct promises of protection were made to him, and therefore he could not sue the police for failing to come in his aid. In other words, the police do not have to act if someone is actively being harmed, they do not have to arrest someone who has violated orders, and they do not have any obligation to protect you from others. So what the fuck do they have an obligation to do? Why are we giving them half the budget of our city? Why are we paying them inordinate amounts of money if they are not there to protect the citizens? The very thing that they're told time and time again, this is why they need to exist. I mean, I know that there's definitely the reality of the situation, that they're there to uphold the power of the state and to protect the rich class. Yes, sure. But think about the sales pitch. Think about what we're constantly being fed, especially in mainstream media. A, that these are heroes. B, that they are incredibly valiant. C, that they require a lot amount of funding. And D, that these people are necessary to protect us on a regular basis.
Congress, the division with the Republicans and Democrats, and what's happening this weekend. It reminds me...
Other court rulings have supported that the cops have a duty to protect private property. What is this world? Like, what is... And I, like... Okay, I don't like using this term gaslit, but I feel at times that there's this complete, I don't know, almost like intentional indoctrination of lefties when they try to bring these points up as being that they are just being silly, that you're being ridiculous. You don't understand the way things work, okay? You don't understand, like, all of you just say you want to reform the police or defund the police or even abolish the police, and you're all a bunch of, like, idealists who will call the cops at the first chance. If you lived in an actual dangerous city and weren't just a wealthy bunch of lefties, trust fund babies, and or spoiled brats who went to college and read a little bit of theory and all of a sudden you got radicalized, you would truly understand how the world works. So saith me, the Twitch streamer, in the opposite direction. And at the same time, like, okay, that might be true in some cases. I've personally had a lot of lived experiences. I've been robbed, I've been mugged, I've been beaten. I've lived in what are supposed to be quote-unquote dangerous neighborhoods, not just in the USA, but also in parts of Europe before. And it hasn't really changed my resolve in this respect, because a lot of those situations, it's not as if any of those things would have changed had I had the ability to call and wait for a police officer to arrive and then suddenly assess the situation and then determine at that moment that the best course of action would have been, okay, so this person who's saying that they're going to rob you, because people say this out loud, okay, so they're the ones who are trying to steal from you. Okay, so I'm gonna put him off to the side here. I'm gonna get his statement. Now you go over into this corner over there. Like, no, it's like if you're walking in the streets of Barcelona, you turn a corner and then all of a sudden you may get robbed, you may get mugged. You walk down the streets of Barcelona sometimes, all of a sudden you might just reach into your pockets, as was the case with me, and your wallet and your camera are gone, because it just happens. They target tourists like that, and that's just a direct result of the way a lot of these systems are in play. But again, reinforcing these ideas and the way that television keeps doing the same thing, and TV is so fucking bad for this. Between making poverty porn like Cops basically is, which is just like, you want to watch police officers going after what you think are the bad people in society, and overwhelmingly they're drug addicts, they have mental illness, and they're incredibly poor, time and time again. Why is that? Why is that the thing that keeps on happening? Why isn't there like a whole bunch of Cops episodes about some person who is trying to commit a terrible act that we would all agree is a terribly violent act? They show up just in time, they valiantly become heroes, they take the bad guys down, they arrest them, but it's always like, I'm gonna pull up into the street here and, oh, look at this guy here, he's acting a little unusual, what's going on? All right, well, it seems like you might be in possession of some crystal meth, son. Why don't I take a look at that? Oh yeah, let's put the handcuffs on you and get him in the back, and then or even, like, it doesn't have to even be propaganda. It can be like fucking Dog the Bounty Hunter or any of those shows. They're all just fetishizing the idea that these violent criminals are the worst like elements of society, and overwhelmingly like, what is the common theme? It's usually drug abuse, it's usually poverty, and it's usually mental illness. Isn't this telling to everyone? And then they're gonna flip it around and make 50 new cop dramas about how they are saving society on a they are the thin blue line. They are the only thing standing in between complete and utter chaos and jokerification. And if it wasn't for them, everything would descend instantaneously. So thank God that they have all these semen tracking devices and semen DNA detecting machines so that they can catch every single serial killer and violent criminal that has ever lived. And let's make 20 more of them. And if you think these are racist, hey, come on. This one's a buddy comedy, all right? It's got a white guy and a black guy, and yet everything else is going to be the exact same. But hey, come on, this one's kind of fun. Look at this friendship. Look at this friendship between two ethnicities. Isn't this fun? Isn't this neat? Hey, we can even turn them into fucking comedies. Do you want to see another combination? Why don't we have, a black guy and an Asian guy, and it's going to be a comedy, and it's going to be absolutely hilarious, and you're going to love it, and it's going to be super, super fun. And again, they're going to save the day, and they're going to catch all the bad guys, and it's going to be a hilarious time, and there's going to be 3 of them, and every single one is going to be better than the one that preceded it. Hey, isn't this great? And it just reinforces this over and over and over. And don't forget those semen testing machines for testing rape kits. Well, that's the other thing. Are we actually going to address stuff like that? Are we going to address the fact that a lot of precincts have enormous amounts of backlogs on the amount of rape kits that they have to get through on like, how good are they achieving the actual results that we're paying for? It should be something that people care about or think about.
I believe after Columbine, there was also a major gun meeting. But what's happening with this meeting of the NRA and what it's representing and pushing for?
Well, it's their annual meeting, so it comes up every year, and it is planned well in advance. So the timing, as horrible as it is coincidental. But what it really represents, especially now, is it's sort of I guess you could call it a Republican pep rally. I mean, that's the main point, is to hold this big event in a theater where some of the most important Republican lawmakers, or in certain cases, former president in the country, come together to make speech.
Oops. Something else that's fucked, by the way, is that we've got now this polarization in America And the difference being is that we've got one party, the Republicans, who are just moving in the direction of fascism. It's like, hey, we want to do all the old things of vilifying people. In this case, it happens to be the LGBTQ plus community. All the fucking months and months and months of having to listen to them talk about how queer people are a threat and a danger to children on fucking repeat, how there's going to be indoctrination, how they're all a bunch of groomers, all this kind of shit, the shifting of all of that, having to listen to that, it's of the utmost importance to protect the kids. We have to, because we care about protecting the children. We have to legislate all these people. We have to try to legislate them out of existence.
And a theater where some of the most important Republican lawmakers, or in certain cases, former president in the country, come together to make speeches
cover the Cuellar
to
thing
talk
later.
about an absolutist vision of the Second Amendment and how that particular freedom defends all other freedoms. And that's sort of the purpose, to bring people together to rally around that idea.
And Mike, in terms of the NRA was racked by major financial scandals just a few years.
I vaguely knew a guy in college who was studying to be a cop, and he joked about he can't wait to shoot down black people, and he was pretty openly white supremacist by the time I graduated. I think he's on the force now. Great. I mean, the most fucked up thing about the GOP is that the police support this. The police and the GOP, hand in hand, you know, is the other fucked up aspect of all of this.
Years ago, how has it been able to survive and remain intact as such a potent force on the right?
Well, I think it's barely surviving. And I actually think, and this is sort of the president was mistaken when he talked about the country being beholden to the gun lobby, because I'm not sure that's so much the case anymore. I think for a long time, the NRA was a potent force and did an exceptionally good job at socializing its members, and most specifically Republican constituents, into absorbing its ideas about the Second Amendment and its messaging.
Great job by Jordan, by the way, of retweeting every single GOP politician who was saying thoughts and prayers with the amount of money that they had received by lobbying groups, by the gun lobby groups. Like, that was, like, especially Ted Cruz, who was at the top of the list.
And the fear mongering and all of that stuff. But I think it's sort of, the machine works on autopilot now. And I think that the Republican Party effectively absorbed that platform and is now just beholden to its platform and the sort of monster they created. But I do think that if the NRA disappeared tomorrow, for example, I'm not sure that the party would be able to move its position.
Yeah,
or would
Romney,
be willing
13
to.
million.
And that's sort of
was it Mitt Romney at the top?
issue.
Let's see that. I'm about to look at one of Ted Cruz's recent posts to find that list. And also, by the way, half of them were also saying that we have to send our thoughts and prayers and thank the brave police officers who first encountered the shooter. Ted Cruz, Marsha McSally, Marsha Blackburn, Dean Heller, Rick Scott, Josh Hawley, Kevin Kramer, Sidney Hyde-Smith. This is the top 30 gun rights contributions to U.S. senators. Oh, these are senators. Romney probably tops the list then. Marco Rubio gets $3.3 million from NRA donations. Lindsey Graham gets 55, pretty low. I would have expected more. 78. Richard Shelby, 258,000. Rand Paul, 104,000. Rob Portman, 3 million. Bill Cassidy, 2.8 million. Joni Ernst, 3.1 million. Tom Cotton, 1.9 million. Mitt Romney, 13 million. Overwhelmingly Mitt Romney. By a fucking fuck ton. Like, I don't want to get all theory here, but one of the biggest things and contradictions that Marx saw under capitalism was that capitalism itself was going to create a stratified class that he was not witnessing getting liberated under liberalism. The fraternité, égalité, liberté was not going to be spread equally amongst all the citizens, and one of the problems he saw was that there was going to be an influence within a democratic political system by capital, and you have but no further to look than something like this.
Right? It's now, I mean, there used to be a little more gray area, but it's now really just Democrats on one side and Republicans on the other. And I don't think, for instance, if there was a Republican senator who was willing to break ranks, with the exception of maybe like Romney, who's in a sort of different, unique position in the state of Utah, but if a Republican lawmaker in the Senate was willing to break ranks, I don't think they'd have to worry about the NRA drafting a primary opponent. I think just a primary opponent would surface and then would use the issue to sort of beat the incumbent over the head with, and that's sort of the predicament that we're in.
And you've been following, especially the Supreme Court and its possible upcoming case on pistol permits. Could you talk about that as well?
Yes. So for a long time, in order to get a permit to carry a concealed weapon in the city of New York, or in the state of New York, rather, there were a number of boxes you had to check off, one of which was you had to provide a good reason.
This is so hard to get past with a filibuster. Yeah. Dr. Rashad has some thoughts on that were pretty interesting.
Right? So now you have children dead because of a mass shooting. I think Democrats like to be reactionary, because as long as they can be reactionary, they get to ride the sentiment of all of our reaction and connect or identify with our anger. What you just saw, for most people who watched it, will say, I can identify with Joe Biden. I feel the same way. What has changed? We literally elect people to do one primary job, to transform policies. The job is a policy job. What are some policies that can change? Number one, reduce access to guns. Number two, criminally prosecute gun manufacturers. Your DOJ can start doing that. Number three, create executive order after executive order until the United States Supreme Court says it's illegal. And by that time, you may not even be president anymore, all right? And here's another point about the Christian angle. Let's pray, which is good. I'm a praying man myself. But that same Bible says faith without works is dead, Mr. President. That same scripture says, if you say you believe in something and you do not have the actions to back it up, then your belief is dead, according to scripture. I know it comes across this weak, but what I think Joe Biden is institutional. He's an institutionalist. He believes in institutional norms. He does not want to offend institutional barriers. He doesn't want to do things that make him seem as if he's a guy that's anti-institution, because he thinks it's something very sacred about the institution of the presidency. And as I've said before, there's not a damn thing sacred about that job. There's not a damn thing sacred about politics. It's not a damn thing sacred about their presidency. The only thing left that's sacred are the voters that put you there to change things. That's it. And if you can't figure that out before your term is up, sir, you are going to hand this country to a dictator, guaranteed.
He's never going to figure it out.
Yeah. Look, I personally think.
I thought there were some strong words. On the other side of the aisle, probably one of the worst moments in Glenn Greenwald history.
It does seem like the span between tragedy coming across the iPhone and partisan response is getting down to mere seconds.
I mean, this is the second time in, I think, 7 days that I've been on your show, both of which
Second time in 7 days. Wow. Great times for Glenn Greenwald.
Have had incredibly heinous and horrific tragedies.
Yes.
Immediately followed by naked exploitation of the dead bodies before anything is known about the people involved, including.
So let's start. He just stated Joe Biden is engaging in naked exploitation of the dead bodies before knowing any of the details.
The killer, I was watching Joe Biden. I empathize so much with what Will said that at the beginning of his speech, I was really hoping that he would strike exactly that note as somebody who has twice had to bury a child. He could really empathize with, in a unique way, with how uniquely heinous it is. He could talk about.
How fucked up is that? I was just aghast, to be totally honest with you. Like, I'm not here to I'm not here to defend Joe Biden. I think Joe Biden is a war criminal. I'm not here to be like, oh, we must defend Joe Biden at all costs above all things. But the fucking irony of you to go on there and say Joe Biden is engaged in the naked exploitation of these children because at the end of the day, he's trying to use it for political purposes. I'm now going to go on Tucker Carlson for political purposes to further Tucker Carlson's narrative and aid him by invoking the burial of Joe Biden's dead children.
about the spirituality of our society and the need to unite on what obviously everyone, no matter what your partisan perspective is, reacts in the same way when seeing this sort of thing. And he spent about 6 seconds doing that and then immediately did a detour to figure out how he could squeeze and exploit this situation for partisan advantage. It was so grotesque and, I mean, unsurprising, but also really disappointing to watch.
I mean, he just basically described this segment in its entirety. Pediatrician here. I want people to know that death by firearms is not rare in kids. In fact, it has been the #1 cause of death in this age group since 2020. In 2020 alone, 4,300 children died from firearms. That's the equivalent of one Boeing 747 crash every month for 9 months. In America, not literally any comparative developed country does it come anywhere near. I've treated just 2 children for non-life-threatening gunshot wounds in 7 years of pediatric emergency medicine and 11 years total in pediatrics. Additional contracts, I work at one of the biggest pediatric major trauma centers in the UK, in the second biggest city. Gunshot wounds simply do not feature in my day-to-day work as they do for my US counterparts. I guess things were so intense that even Ben Shapiro had to do a little acquiesce here. Fighting with Piers Morgan. 2 questions. Number 1, 91% of Americans support universal background checks. Do you? If not, why not? Number 2, the 2 most recent massacres were committed by 18-year-olds who legally bought their guns but can't buy a beer until they're 21. Do you think that's right? Number 1, it depends on how you define universal background checks. When it comes to FFLs running background checks on those who buy, I'm in favor. Never thought I'd see the day. This is the line with most Americans. 18-year-olds are considered adults in the US and should be able to vote and buy beer.
Another mass shooting has happened in the United States of America. This time at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, where 14 children were shot dead along with a teacher. Now, there are other individuals who were injured. We don't have all of those details yet. There's at least one 10-year-old girl in critical condition at the hospital, and we also don't know how the gun was obtained, what the motive is. But one thing that we know for sure is that not a goddamn thing is going to be done to stop another mass shooting from happening next week and the week after, because this is just what we've become accustomed to in the United States, where if you're at school, you can be shot dead at any time. If you're at a grocery store, a gunman can walk in and open fire on you, and it just will keep happening. And there's no amount of deaths that will actually galvanize the government, specifically the Republican Party.
Yeah, since he was doing this segment, that number's changed to 19.
Party to act, but yet they're going to feign outrage over this thing that they allowed to happen to students again. And it's nauseating to report on this. Now, what little information that we have, I'm going to give it to you. This is courtesy of the New York Times. A gunman walked into an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas on Tuesday afternoon and killed 14 children and a teacher, Governor Greg Abbott said at a news conference on Tuesday. Police are believed to have killed the gunman. The assailant was an 18-year-old man who abandoned his vehicle and entered the school with a handgun and possibly a rifle, Mr. Abbott said. He shot and killed horrifically, incomprehensibly 14 students and killed a teacher, Mr. Abbott said. 2 children who were killed had died by the time they arrived at Uvalde Memorial Hospital. Adam Apollinaire, the hospital's chief operating officer, said earlier in the afternoon. Their ages were not immediately released. It's heartbreaking. And, even though we expect this to happen in the United States, it doesn't make it any easier. It keeps happening. And before you can even process the current mass shooting or the last mass shooting, there's this looming dread knowing that this is going to happen probably next week. Again, who knows where it's going to be at? Perhaps, another elementary school, grocery store again. We don't know. But this is life in the United States of America. And I just want to stress to all of my non-American viewers, if you're wondering, maybe this is going to be, the straw that broke the camel's back. There is no straw that broke the camel's back. This is going to keep happening and nothing will happen. And I tweeted about this, and it's pretty cynical, but it's accurate. There could be 1,000 kids shot dead, and still Republicans will not even do the most basic gun control. Now, again, we don't know the details. We don't know how the gun was obtained. But as I said earlier, not to sound like a broken record, we all know that nothing's going to come of this. It's just going to keep happening. This is life in the United States of America. We have a party that will turn women into second-class citizens to protect zygotes. But when it comes to stopping children from being slaughtered at schools, fuck it. Thoughts and prayers. In fact, that's literally the response. Ted Cruz, the senator who represents this state, tweeted out, Heidi and I are fervently lifting up in prayer the children and families in the horrific shooting in Uvalde. We are in close contact with local officials, but the precise details are still unfolding. Thank you to heroic law enforcement and first responders for acting so swiftly. Yeah, Nina Turner had the best response to this. She replied by saying, well, you're thanking them for acting swiftly, but when are you going to act swiftly? I mean, take those thoughts and prayers and shove them up your asshole, Ted Cruz. Do you think that your thoughts and prayers is going to make any of these parents feel better or bring back those lives? What matters is action. Doing something to stop this. So go fuck yourself. How dare you speak right now? You should be afraid to show your face after you've been one of the individuals who's blocking this. And as Brian Tyler Cohen points out, this is Tony Gonzalez, who represents the district that contains the elementary school in Uvalde, Texas, that just got shot up. Here's a couple of tweets from him. I voted no on 2 gun control measures in the House today. I am a proud supporter of the Second Amendment and will do everything I can to oppose gun grabs from the far left. He also writes, the radical left wants to take away your guns. Not on my watch. Proud to defend your Second Amendment. Well, thank God we have people there to defend our Second Amendment rights. If only, our right to just exist, if children's right to not be slaughtered in schools was a thing you'd defend, that'd be really fucking great. But not in the United States of America. This is a country that has a very, very sick culture, and we have one of 2 political parties that is effectively a death cult at this point. I mean, we just passed 1 million COVID deaths, and nobody even talks about that. So death is just something that Americans have grown accustomed to, not just with this, but with healthcare. Thousands of Americans die every single year because they don't have basic access to healthcare. People are sleeping on the streets and dying due to hunger in this country, and that's just the way it is in the United States of America. A sick, disgusting, perverted culture that we have that allows this. So I don't have really anything to add. I just wanted to talk about this and share my immediate thoughts. I usually don't react to mass shootings, but it just feels like, I don't know, I wanted to share my immediate thoughts because sometimes the way that people react to tragic news stories in a good way is like listening to other people, and maybe that helps them process what's happening. Maybe this will help you process. I'm not really sure. Maybe, this is therapeutic for me to get on camera and talk about it. I'm not necessarily sure, but this happened again. Nobody's surprised, and nothing will be done to stop gun violence in the United States. And it's a sad state of affairs, but this is what we've grown accustomed to.
Something else to keep in mind is that if the response is going to be, well, this was a lone gunman and clearly a sign of severe mental illness, which I'm not going to say one way or the other until we know all the facts of the matter. If that's something you care about, then why are you not advocating for things like Medicare for all? If you genuinely care about a mental health crisis in your country, if you can actually look at the statistics and see the amount of people who are in jail who do have mental illness, who do have substance abuse problems, then attacking those problems should be at the forefront. If you think mental illness is a problem, then you should be doing things to address mental illness. When people talk about poverty, for example, and it's like, well, it seems like in every case of extreme poverty that leads to crime, it's very, very difficult to actually pinpoint what is the root of all this. It's very difficult to, at the same time, I think the answer would be more policing. We should increase the amount of police presence in these areas. If there's more police, it'll just render things to be more safe. We're not actually going to tackle it. How do we deal with homelessness? Because homelessness comes with a whole bunch of problems. It comes with crime. People will, commit crimes in order to get what they want, whether it's drugs or food or even a place to stay. They'll break into a place if it's going to provide them some shelter. How do we deal with that? Do we provide them with housing? Do we end homelessness by providing people with adequate housing? No, We don't do that. In fact, we tear down tent cities using the police force, by the way. The very police force that is supposed to protect and serve the citizens, well, we use it to basically tear down the homes of the poor. If there are people who are building homes, like that interview we did with that organization in Vegas that were actually building actual homes for people who don't have them, they got torn down. Even on their own property that they had to end up buying, they will tear down those homes because, oh, well, this is a safety concern. We can't really risk you potentially having homes that could, burn down if they're not built to code or anything like that. It seems to be a perpetual cycle. The very people who want to say that mental illness is the cause of this, and that's all there is to it, are the same people who aren't going to do fucking jack shit when it comes to actually addressing that issue. Why not address systemic poverty? Why not address inequality? Why not address insecurity? Why not address alienation? Why not address all of these things that seem to continue to contribute towards horrifying and tragic events? And they're not unique to just America. They occur in other places. There may be less carnage because people have less access to guns in other countries, but there is still violent acts committed in places like Canada where people will shoot up mosques because they bought into the indoctrination that apparently there is a radical Muslim majority that is going to come for them, and so they turn to places on the internet. Why do people buy into great replacement theory? Why did they suddenly believe that there is going to be a replacement of white people and this is a war that they have to take upon themselves? Why would they turn to that kind of radicalization? What is the cause of all this? Why are people continuously looking for answers and finding them in the worst places? Why is misogyny being transformed into entire communities of violent men who want to commit acts of violence against women under the name of being incels and stuff like that, when they are looking for support in the worst places on the internet, and it's being propagated? But all of this comes from a source of inequality. All of this comes from a place where people don't have their needs met, and so they will look for answers elsewhere. And the worst people in the world aren't going to provide them. Alex Jones is going to tell you a conspiracy theory about a false flag attack. Tucker Carlson is going to tell you a conspiracy theory about white people being replaced and then try to use a bunch of dog whistles to mask that. Strong men like, neo-fascists and dictators are going to other groups and tell them that those are the reasons. It's actually Muslims coming into this country that are causing all your problems. It's not us, or it's China. It's China that are causing all these problems. And then watch the rise of anti-Asian hatred and attacks take place and continue. It's if you as a Democratic Party or a Liberal Party in Canada are not going to do what is necessary to address the needs of people, is not going to do what is necessary to stop this, and at the same time use it as a voter issue, as hey, we need you to campaign, you need to get on the side of the party that's not outright and moving towards fascism. Like, fair enough, Republicans are much worse. They've made that blatantly clear, trying to scapegoat the LGBTQ plus community. But if you on the other end are just going to uphold the same systems, if you're just going to uphold corporate candidates who do not do anything for the people, who just want to maintain the corporate dominance in the Western world, the world that's supposed to be this untold, incredible place. It's the richest, most amazing place on earth. All these Western countries that have vast amounts of wealth, they also have incredible amounts of inequality. And all of this is masked under this whole idea of exceptionalism and idealism, and that we are the one true path forward, while all it is propping up the interests of corporations who are making obscene amounts of profits on death, on the lives of people. It doesn't matter if it's a gun company that has sold the AR-15s and the bullets that are used in mass shootings, all the way to companies that profit massively over a housing crisis, or the prison industrial complex. Whatever it is, it's all propped up under a system in which profits are put over people. Profits are prioritized over people. Hell, profits are prioritized over the survival of the entire human race when it comes to climate change. And they will turn around and they'll do that thing where they start to talk about how, well, we hear you, we're making a change now. If you didn't hear this, Shell's going to be completely green by 2050. And then someone who's worked there for a long time, for about 11 years, just quits because they're like, yeah, I'm just going to come out and flat out say, they're not. They're not. This is greenwashing. All of it is greenwashing. It's all washing of various different forms. Corporations will come out and tell you that they are very pro LGBTQ plus, especially during 1 month of the year, and then they'll do the exact opposite. They'll release the transphobic specials. Disney will support politicians who want to support anti-LGBTQ plus legislation. It's all a facade. It's all of them consistently trying to use social issues to better their brands, to sanitize their brands, while they they just reap incredible profits at the expense of humanity. That's what it is on a regular basis. Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form, available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
To our gods, Xander Corvus and Peyton L. Just, we are prepared to embark on a mighty jihad in your name. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we are but your humble jester, attempting in vain to get you to laugh. To our valiant knights of the Round Table, Benji Arnie, Tech Tink, Scary Earth Human, Tony, DM Rivera, Resident Scarecrow, Sir Nickus, Mayred, Cheryl Alvarez, Ruby Kelly, Brandon, Words Greenwood. It doesn't matter what I believe, it only matters what I can prove. Egbert Celine, Matthew Scarborough, Stellar Vision, Ariane McCarthy, Daniel Sutton, Coulter Smith, Jenna Tao, Quiet 185, Anna Loves Riley, Omni, Riley and Anna, Poodlehawk, The Tim Caucus, Multimondi, Trevbot, EXE, Brian Ephraim, Lemmy 101, Anthropophojak, Saren 42, Catherine, Ramon Acosta, Incosin, Agent NDN, Violent Orchard, Political Puppy, La Media Panza, Zach Christensen, Todd Buckingham, and Todd Lajeunesse. We raise our mugs and salute our brave heroes off to another glorious conquest.